Hello, I'm Eric Gensler, Capacity Interactive's president and founder. I'm a white male with brown hair, brown eyes, a beard, and wearing a short sleeve collared blue dress shirt. My pronouns are he, him. And today I'm coming to you from the native land of the Agua Caliente band of the Cahuilla Nation in Palm Springs, California. When the Southern Pacific Railroad was built in the 1870s, displacing native peoples, the government divided the land into a checkerboard of squares. Even numbered parcels went to the tribe, odd ones to the railroad to entice new settlers. This checkerboard of ownership still remains today, and the tribe currently represents the largest single landowner in Palm Springs. Excuse me. Why do we do land acknowledgements? The teaching of US history has left out many voices and difficult truths, including forcibly removing people from lands they inhabited in order to create an idealized nationalistic identity. It's important we share our history to understand how it impacts systems we may otherwise take for granted or inadvertently accept today. This is one part of our ongoing work to be more inclusive. We're not experts in this work and are still learning, and we'll pass around resources in the follow-up materials so you can join us in this learning process. Now, we had booked a live captioner for today, and literally 3 minutes before we went live, we learned that they had a last-minute power outage and were unable to attend. We are very committed to this. We're bummed, and we'll make sure that the archive of this recording is captioned to have that. So sorry for the inconvenience there. I want to welcome you all here today. Thank you. I know how much content there is out there. I want to welcome arts and culture administrators and educators from all over the United States and world, students, consultants, and practitioners from organizations large and small. Welcome to the Capacity Interactive team joining us from around the country. Now, I'm about to share some research from a pandemic year, a year of social reckoning full of all sorts of challenges and uncertainty. And since we're not in the same room, I'd like to start by orienting ourselves with a few deep breaths. Heads up, it's about to get a little woo-woo. And for the woo-woo skeptics, I'm asking you to please just go with me for a few breaths here. Close your eyes and breathe in for 5 breaths. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold and breathe out for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And keep going in this pattern with your eyes closed, breathing in to a count of 5 and breathing out to a count of 5. The first breath is for you. You are here, you're awake, you're alive, and you can put aside the worries of your day-to-day for this time we are together. Now, your next breath, take a deep breath, and on your out breath, send the energy, your energy, to all the people who have lost loved ones to COVID, those who you know and those who you don't, perhaps people on this call who lost loved ones to COVID. On your next breath, take in a deep breath and send the energy out of your out breath to the frontline workers who have sacrificed so much. On your next breath, take another deep breath and send the energy of your out breath to acknowledge how structural inequalities exacerbate this pandemic for many people, especially BIPOC people. Take a deep breath and send the energy of your out breath to the BIPOC people joining us today who have had to do free labor in terms of educating their colleagues about systemic racism in addition to the jobs that they are paid to do. This may be you. And now, one more breath for yourself. Your breath is always available to you. Center, and that is a gift. Now, open your eyes. We all hold so much grief and trauma from this past year and hope for a better tomorrow. We've lived through a year of profound transformation in every aspect of our lives. Arts administrators are now in a moment where we can see some light at the end of this long tunnel. Almost 2 million vaccines are being administered per day in the US, with President Biden promising enough for every American by July. We're planning for more in-person openings at our venues, and it seems more real for those organizations that have not been open for almost a year. This is a critical moment for us to look back and to look ahead. And so we're here today to discuss this question. What is the impact of the pandemic on arts marketing? Today, we'll be looking at findings from a recent study of over 50 arts organizations we conducted in late 2020, and then talking about what to do with what we've learned. Broadly, the study covers two areas: organizational health, and by that I mean the health of the people and cultures within arts organizations and how they've been impacted over this past year, and two, marketing strategy, looking at some of the changes in marketing strategy, tactics, and platforms brought on by the pandemic. But looking at the results of our survey is only the beginning of what I want to cover today, because the arts do not happen in a vacuum. We will explore research from other fields and some of what I've been thinking about as we move forward as an arts industry. We certainly do not have all the answers, and I hope today will inspire you to spend some time thinking about how our data and these frameworks can inspire you in the days and months ahead. Since 2012, Capacity Interactive has been conducting benchmarking surveys to understand how arts organizations are evolving in their digital marketing efforts. Many of you may have downloaded one of these benchmark reports from our website, including our most recent report published in November of 2018. Because 2020 was so unique, we won't be publishing a white paper. While we did collect fiscal year 19 data for long-term study purposes, what we're sharing with you today is what we call our COVID capsule. The pandemic. We worked with Wolf Brown as a research consultant to assist on this methodology, survey design, data visualization, and analysis. A bit about our methodology: we surveyed 53 organizations across budget size from under $2 million to over $50 million. And the sample includes performing arts producers and presenters and attendance-based organizations like museums. You can see the distribution of both budget size and organizational type here. This is comparable to the distribution of operating models and budget sizes from our 2018 white paper. Throughout the session, please feel free to ask your questions in the chat or use the Google form link that's pinned to the top of the chat feature. We'll be releasing a See Eye to Eye podcast episode in a few weeks to dive into the questions and ideas this session has brought up. So even if we don't get to answer all your questions today, we will address them in the podcast and really appreciate hearing your thoughts. Something I've been thinking about quite a lot, and inspired by Scott Galloway, author of the book Post-Corona, is how the pandemic is an accelerant for trends that were already happening. They just happened much faster, like 5 to 10 years faster in a matter of months. Arts organizations' adoption of digital programming registered years of growth in just months. Something else most arts organizations were years away from adopting just happened almost overnight this last year, around how we work together. Remote work, remote meetings, how certain departments who never worked together were collaborating in new ways. So I want to start by looking at data we collected around culture and organizational health. You may be asking, Eric, you run a digital marketing firm. Why are we not starting with digital marketing? Because digital is not just about technology. I believe any digital marketing success must stand on a base of healthy culture, of strong leadership that recognizes that digital success is far more than just tactics. It starts with people and culture. Our data showed that arts marketers are working with fewer teams, smaller budgets, and fewer resources. We saw, on average, staff size of marketing departments decreased by 27% from February 2020 to December 2020. There is financial loss in that, and there is also human loss and human trauma in that. The pain of losing colleagues, seeing them go through that loss, and losing years of institutional knowledge. There's also a cost for organizations to rebuild. The Society for Human Resources Management says the cost to replace full-time staff is 6 to 9 months of their salary. Organization knowledge was certainly lost, and it cost time and money to rebuild that. And we all know that arts organizations had resourcing challenges even before the pandemic began. We asked, what, if anything, prevented you from developing the creative and content for digital that you would have liked to in fiscal year 19? This is before the pandemic. And the top two were staff spread too thin at 85% and inadequate budget at 57%. Arts administrators have always been asked to do more with less. We believe that arts administrators are superheroes, so creative and scrappy. And honestly, that is one of the reasons I loved working in the field, is the opportunity to do so much. And you often had to be so creative to make things happen. And I think arts administrators are brilliant at that, which doesn't mean that it is easy. We offered those taking the survey a chance to write in a list of their top challenges during the pandemic year. And the top three areas mentioned without any prompts were around managing with reduced staff, managing uncertainty, and then mental health and challenges with company culture. These are big topics, big human topics that need to be addressed, and I believe that good leaders must address. We also asked people to choose from areas that we selected, asking them, which of the following challenges has your marketing department faced in this last year? We offered a list of challenges to respondents, and here you can see the top ones identified within marketing departments from the list offered. So the top, starting at the top, troubleshooting tech for virtual events, 62%, cross-departmental collaboration, 64%, staff furloughs and layoffs, 70%, digital infrastructure limitations at 81%. And then the final three, all over 90%, staff morale, budget cuts, and at 96%, uncertainty, challenges with planning ahead. Many of these are organizational culture challenges, challenges with cross-departmental collaboration, with staff morale, from planning through uncertainty. I believe good leadership and a strong culture can help a staff manage these challenges. And I want to offer my empathy to everyone and also share what I hope are some helpful tools to deal with these challenges as you rebuild. There are frameworks and strategies to improving workplace culture. Lots of work and research has been done in this area, and I personally am obsessed with it. And this is not just lofty. I think it is required for modern leaders and organizations to address these issues head on. And I know many of you have, and it's been so impressive to hear and learn from leaders who are doing really creative, amazing things here. Although, of course, not everybody is. And if you need further justification, Salesforce released a really interesting study that I'm going to be quoting from. And it says that 82% of consumers say that treatment of employees during this year's crisis influenced their decision to buy from a company. Customers are hyper-connected digitally, and what used to stay within your organization can spread much faster outside now. We've seen headlines of arts organizations that have gotten into some real public challenges for their treatment of employees, and these headlines peaked in 2020 and into this year. When I think about organizational health, one author I find myself going back to often is Patrick Lencioni, who runs an organization called The Table Group and published a number of books about organizational culture, including one of my favorites called The Advantage, which I highly recommend to anybody working in or leading a team. Lencioni lays out two requirements for success: smart and healthy. He says that the single greatest advantage any company can achieve is organizational health, yet it is ignored by most leaders, even though it is simple, free, and available to anyone who wants it. Most well-intentioned leaders tend to gravitate to the left side, the smart column, strategy, marketing, fundraising, the so-called hard skills, and they're often ignoring the right side, which is the healthy side. Minimal politics, minimal confusion, high morale, high productivity, low turnover. And by focusing attention on those, you create a much healthier culture that allows you to have far better results. He goes on and says that once organizational health is properly understood and placed in the right context, it will surpass all other disciplines in business as the greatest opportunity for improvement and competitive advantage, really. And I deeply, deeply believe that. Another Patrick Lencioni book that I use, I don't love the book, but I love this framework called The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And he says a team, meaning in the case, it could be your senior staff. This could be your marketing team, your development team, your education team. Anytime people are coming together to solve problems, he looks at this pyramid model, and the base of the pyramid is trust. Individuals on a team need to trust each other interpersonally. And the dysfunction, he calls it dysfunction of a team because he owns like every team is dysfunctional. We are all human beings. There is always going to be dysfunction because people come from different backgrounds with different experiences, and dysfunction is to be expected. But if you name it, you can work on it. So absence of trust means unwillingness for people to be vulnerable within a group. You have to be able to trust your colleagues in order to have safe conflict, right? Conflict about ideas rather than people. If you have trust, you can have safe conflict without fear of retribution. And fear of conflict is seeking artificial harmony over constructive, passionate debate. He says leaders need to mine for conflict, and not nasty conflict, but conflict over ideas. In fact, we had our staff meeting this morning, and I think we had some of the best conflict we've ever had. And it was a really healthy and really great. And we asked hard questions of each other, and we came out with some really great next steps. And if you have safe conflict, you can have commitment. And a lot of organizations have lack of commitment, which is feigning buy-in for group decisions, which creates ambiguity throughout an organization. Look, not everyone's always going to agree with a decision, but you still need to have commitment. You may not agree, but this is the path we're moving on. Do we have commitment? And then once you have commitment, you can move to accountability. And avoidance of accountability is a dysfunction, and that's ducking the responsibility to call peers, supervisors on peers and supervisors on counterproductive behavior, which sets low standards. And once you have trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, then you have results. And results is inattention to results is focusing on personal successes, status, and ego before the team's success. So I could talk about this model for a very long time. I think it's really, really interesting. And, you know, it's based on these soft skills that I think are fundamentally important, and calling them soft skills undermines their importance. And I've really learned that the limitation in any organization is the willingness of the leaders to grow and how much they're willing to be wrong. I'm inspired by Brene Brown and her much repeated quote, "I don't want to be right, I want to get it right." Call me out. Did I say something wrong? Could we do this better? Put my ego aside, call me out. This is like I think this is so important, particularly around, you know, equity work and leadership, but anybody working in any organization, I don't want to be right. I want to get it right. The next framework I want to share comes from General Electric. And you're like, General Electric, what does that have to do with anything? Well, I actually worked at General Electric. I started my career at General Electric as an NBC page because General Electric owned NBC. And unfortunately, I cannot find a picture of myself in that exact outfit, but this is Kenneth the Page. For you 30 Rock fans out there. But yes, I started early in my career giving tours of NBC studios, and it was a really fun, interesting experience. And I went on to build my career at NBC, working in sales and marketing. And they invest a lot of money in understanding human resources and organizational culture. And one thing that they use is this performance versus values matrix. And look, do I think, like, first of all, there's plenty of problems with corporate America, and any of these people and examples I'm showing, like, I don't think they're 100% right. I think they're useful in things that we can learn from. So trying to take the good with the bad, but this matrix is really, I think, helpful. And it looks at evaluating employees, looking not only at their hard skills, like most companies do, but also looking at, so the hard skills they call performance, but also their values, which means it's like soft skills, or how well they play by the rules of the culture, of the values outlined by the culture. So looking at the quadrants, the top right quadrant, high performance and high values match. This is an employee who is really aligned with the values of the organization, is doing great on meeting their goals for their job. Obviously, you retain and promote that employee. The next quadrant is the bottom right, which is the low performance, high values employee. Well, the employee is high values and they may be having some trouble. And the takeaway from this is spend some time with that employee, coach them because they have the high values to get them up to that top right quadrant. The bottom left quadrant is the obvious one, low performance, low values. Well, you might want to look at your hiring. How did that person get into the role? Low performance, low values. You have to do the hard thing and part ways with that person. But the top left quadrant is the trickiest. This is the high performance, low values match person. This is the toxic employee. This may be the fundraiser or marketer who meets their goals, but no one likes working with. This may be the person that causes endless drama, who kisses up and kicks down. We need to rid our organizations of these individuals because they erode morale and cause us to lose high values people and erode the healthy cultures that are critical to our success. This is really hard to do, but I cannot underscore how valuable this is to identify that behavior and root it out of your organizations. Now, to do this, of course, requires having clear values outlined. And many arts organizations have missions, but your mission is not your values. Values are the rules of engagement. The values are how people work together. Here are Capacity Interactive's mission and values. Our mission to help the arts engage audiences, build community, and market smarter. And our values are openness, happiness, growth mindset, sharing, measurement, partnership, passion. And we use these values to, like in our performance evaluations and when giving feedback. And when we were in person in an office, they were actually written on our wall. I'm sharing examples from Capacity, not because I think we do everything right, but we face many of the same challenges that arts organizations faced when we were forced, when arts organizations were forced to close their doors. We had a huge impact of that. Our business declined by more than 50% after arts organizations closed their doors last spring and is still in a very reduced state. Even the largest arts organization is a small business. There are so many similarities. And many of us come from working within arts organizations. We too have the awful necessity of furloughing staff and implementing salary reductions. So all of this I'm saying is with like the utmost of empathy and also with a lack of ego. I do not have all the answers, but I'm sharing things that I think have been very useful to us in the hope that they'll be useful to you. And, we try to do everything from a people first lens because I really believe in that pyramid with people at the bottom. I want to reference something I learned in my recent podcast interview with the executive director of Help Graphics in the east side of LA, the brilliant Betty Avila. Betty talked about how she rose through her career working at primarily white institutions that were led in a very top-down and patriarchal way. This really resonated in me because once I thought about it, I learned that that's where I learned too. And that's certainly what I experienced, not only at arts organizations, but like at NBC and when I worked in management consulting. Decisions and policies would come down from high. It was this, even when my last arts nonprofit job, there were we used the term worker bees, and then the people who made the decisions. And in these last few years studying anti-racism, I learned that anti-racism is about power sharing, creating structures where people at all levels and organizations participate in decision making. At Capacity Interactive, over this last year, we created a group called our Arena Team that creates all sorts of policies through an anti-racism lens. That includes job descriptions, performance evaluations, feedback forms, professional development planning. And as a leader, I have to say it has not only been a thrill to watch the leadership that has emerged, to see people that have never worked in this kind of area creating better policies than I could have created or many on our senior team could have created because they're so much closer to the work. But also, we just get better policies And everyone is more connected to the outcomes because they have a part in the creation of them. I can't recommend it highly enough. You can learn more about this in our December update to our anti-racism commitments on the Capacity Interactive blog, and look out for future updates as we're holding ourselves accountable to publish quarterly updates. Shout out to our manager of people operations, Molly Shoemaker, who wrote this update and will be writing the future ones and leads the efforts in our arena team. So back to our pyramid with people at the base, especially in times of crisis, you have to firm up this base. When the pandemic first hit, people felt groundless. I certainly felt groundless. I know our team felt groundless. We wanted to make sure we were all aligned. We shared this rallying cry, so we were all focused and knew what was important. And it was important that it was human-centered and empathetic. So we said, we believe the arts are critical to humanity, and we are deeply dedicated to the field's success and survival. We are in this together. We must remember why we are here and lean into our values during this time. And then listing 5 specific areas for our staff to focus on. Support and be kind to yourself and your colleagues. Put your seatbelt on first, right? These are tough times. Take breaks, reach out, be a generous colleague. 2, serve our clients with empathy, flexibility, service, and clarity to help them serve their organization throughout this crisis and beyond. 3, be of service to the arts field, provide free content, professional development, and resources. 4, identify opportunities to bolster CI in the short term. And then 5, strategize, prepare, and plan for the other side when the arts ecosystem and world looks differently. So I've brought that up many times. Patrick Lencioni says the head of an organization is the chief repeating officer. I could do better at that, but I want to bring this up and share this with you. You can use this tool, at any time for your department or for your organization to allow people to focus and set what's important. The last couple things about some things that we did, like many leaders, we felt and saw the stress amongst our team members during 2020. So we felt it was important to lean into maximum flexibility, not only for ourselves, but for our full team. I certainly felt that. We extended summer Fridays. We already had summer Fridays just for the weeks between Memorial Day and Labor Day, where our office closed at 2, but we extended that till the end of 2020. And then once that was coming to an end, we were like, well, we need to keep extending this. So we extended this until the end of summer 2021. So the workday ends at 2:00 on Fridays. We made clear that we would be flexible to employee needs around working hours and schedules. We also extended our December holiday break to a full 2 weeks of paid time off so people could relax and recover. I think rest is just undervalued in our culture, and you're certainly not weak for needing to take time to rest. Through our last thing here, through our anti-racism work, I learned about the importance of safe feedback channels. As such, we created 2 things. 1, an anonymous feedback form that only goes to our manager of people ops, who can then decide how to channel that feedback. We also, just to feel that people can give feedback safe and without fear of retribution. We also conduct full staff pulse surveys each month to check on how people are feeling about their roles, their connection to the work, their relationship with their managers and their peers. And the results of this survey are released to the full staff at the same time. I or no one on our senior staff receives the results before anybody else. This was sort of a big, scary departure to me, particularly how senior leaderships in past organizations and how we did it, where we would see results and decide to share or not share. But now we release it immediately to everybody. I would never go back. I think I've let that go, and recognizing with data comes power and also comes accountability. And I think it's a really powerful thing for us and for you to consider. So as you can tell, I love talking about workplace culture and could do it all day. But we are a digital marketing firm, and I want to move up the pyramid and look at some digital strategy and tactics. Going back to the idea of the pandemic as an accelerant, we definitely saw that in the survey data around digital. For years in our organizational benchmarking, we've been tracking organizations' self-assessment of their own digital strategies. And what we've typically seen is evolution year over year in the digital marketing within marketing departments, but far less and far slower evolution within the wider organization beyond, it's Giving Tuesday, let's send an email and run a social campaign. There wasn't much evolution in development and programming and other parts of the organization. So we asked, which of the following best describes how digital strategies implemented across your organization during fiscal year compared to currently? And from fiscal year 19 to December 2020, there was a 49% increase in organizations who strongly agreed that they have an overarching digital strategy and strong campaign coordination across the organization. This is really significant. I think remote work allowed people to work closer, break down barriers and break down silos. And in 2020, we saw like years of evolution happening in mere months. Another non-arts example of accelerant of the pandemic as an accelerant, which I think is just really interesting. Since early 2000, e-commerce share of overall retail, meaning percentage of retail that was transacted through e-commerce versus not. Since early 2000, it grew about 1% a year. In March and April 2020 alone, we saw the equivalent of 10 years worth of growth in 2 months and for the share of retail. And it's certainly not going back. And I think that's mirrored in a lot of things in arts organizations' absorption of digital, particularly around digital programming. And that pain is hard. And that growth is hard. That growth has lots of pain. The next stat here, we learned that 83% of respondents agree that their organization is harnessing digital marketing tools in a new way because of the pandemic. Also, the advertising mix within organizations dramatically changed. 74% of respondents decreased the number of platforms where they spent paid digital media between fiscal year 19 and 2020. And I'd like to dig into that a little further. Now, of course, for most organizations, there was just less programming to sell and different programming to sell. This slide is a lot, so we're going to go through it piece by piece. The darker top line is fiscal year 19, and then the red is the pandemic year. And you can see that Facebook Ads Manager, 100% of organizations were using before, 91% during the pandemic year. Instagram, 87% before, 70% during the pandemic year. Facebook and Instagram are certainly the winners here, which matches sort of more global trends. The next block is around direct placements and programmatic display. That had pretty solid absorption with the arts before, but dropped more than 50% almost for direct placements and programmatic display. And then the final area here, organizations, about 43% held on to boosting posts on Facebook. And we saw a pretty significant drop in paid SEM, a drop in YouTube advertising, and then a drop in Twitter that was pretty small. And one of the big questions to me is, once we go back in person, how much of this will go back and how much will stick? Are arts marketers finally, ready to evolve, all of the how we used to do things as we move forward? And so I want to explore some broader trends in the digital advertising universe to hopefully help answer this question. One thing that we look at capacity when thinking about what digital platforms to invest our clients' money and time, we find it helpful to look at active monthly users. Are the users there? And here you can see certainly the dominance of Facebook, almost 3 billion users, YouTube at 2.3 billion, Instagram across the billion mark. And then we see a drop. TikTok quickly growing, much smaller universe, and then a significant smaller universe on Twitter and LinkedIn. Active users is important, but it's not the only factor. Our last ticket buyer study, which is another study that we work on, we published that in February of 2020, right before the pandemic. We surveyed 18,000 ticket buyers for arts organizations to understand their media habits. And here we looked at frequency of usage as well as usership. So you can see Facebook has high usership and high frequency, meaning people are going multiple times a day or daily. Instagram has medium relative usership, but high frequency. The rest of the platforms like YouTube, for example, high usership, lots of people use YouTube. They're just not going as regularly. LinkedIn, medium usership, low frequency. Twitter, low on both. And this is all certainly worth considering as you select your media mix. At Capacity, even this last year, we've been experimenting with campaigns on LinkedIn and Pinterest, particularly around with some of the ethical questions around Facebook and Instagram. So we're constantly experimenting with new ways to to meet our audiences and help our clients achieve their advertising and marketing objectives. For those thinking about TikTok, we did a really fun TikTok live stream this summer where we talked to arts organizations who are creating content for TikTok, the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh and American Ballet Theater. It's on our YouTube channel. I want to look at some macro level data about the state of advertising and digital marketing beyond the arts. Facebook and Google are just such dominant players. You can see how, even from our data, that they held on to the most, and that was sort of more of a universal trend. Facebook and Google are expected to hold 61% of the digital ad market in 2021. To put that in perspective, 61 cents of every dollar spent on digital advertising go to these two companies. That is massive, because they have built incredibly powerful tools that offer reach and behavioral and demographic targeting like we've never had before. Not too long ago, marketers were not able to speak to different people differently without tremendous cost and tremendous challenge. And now, over the last, I'd say, 20 years, these amazing tools really just gave us such power to connect with our audiences if done well. And I think we're reaching a new moment in digital marketing driven by consumer privacy. It was sort of the Wild West. And that's really headed up by Apple. That is going to make some of this targeting and tracking that we've enjoyed, certainly in the last 10 years, much more challenging for marketers. So I'd be remiss if I don't talk about some updates that we've seen in the digital advertising landscape. Apple recently released an iOS 14 update that will have broad impact across the digital marketing ecosystem, certainly not for the arts, but for everybody. Apple now requires all App Store apps to include a prompt before downloading, allowing users to opt in or out of certain types of data sharing. I imagine many of you have started to see that show up in your apps. I'm going to go in the weeds for a second. And this will be more meaningful for some of you based on your role in your organization's infrastructure. But I think the headlines are really important. Whew, it's a lot of talking. Okay. This is in the weeds, so I'm going to slow down here. So this change with iOS will impact how far back digital marketers can attribute purchases, custom website audiences, such as remarketing pools, as well as the ability to measure certain conversions. Available data will be more aggregated, and there will be limitations on how many separate specific actions that advertisers can track. For example, we'll be limited in our ability to track purchases of individual items or performances, but not necessarily track purchases overall. We've been really spoiled with the level of granularity that we've been able to have for like a performing arts center that's selling 30 things. We'd be able to track how a campaign sold the one thing and the 29 other things. That's certainly getting more challenging, if not impossible. Now, before we get really upset, will all users automatically opt out of data sharing? No. I think some people will say, I want a more customized experience. And does everybody have an Apple device? Certainly not. However, Facebook and other platforms have had to make broad changes in order to be compliant with this. It's like a game of cat and mouse, and this will apply to all users and all devices. One more significant digital marketing change to briefly note: in late 2020, oh my gosh, Google launched GA4, Google Analytics 4, which will start to phase out the older version of Google Analytics, which offers, so new GA4 offers a host of really cool new features for marketers. And GA4 is still in its infancy, and there are bugs to be worked out. And GA4 is months away from becoming the relied upon Google Analytics platform, but it will get there eventually. At CI, our analytics team has rolled out 3 highly customized GA implementations. So we've been to really been able to experience what that's like and are learning. For the analytics nerds out there, the new features include website and app analytics in one place, which is really cool, better cross-device capabilities, which was always challenging, a more flexible data model, and enhanced measurement of site-level engagement rates. It's important to note that your historical GA data will not be migrated to new GA4 accounts. It will live on its own in its current GA account. So now's the time to begin thinking more about GA at 4, and we'll be offering resources. So please look out for that. Now, does all of this scare me? I can honestly say no, it does not. It's a lot of work, and it's certainly a change. But capacity now has been around for over a decade, and during this time, our strategies and priorities across platforms have shifted and evolved many times because the platforms and worlds shift and evolve. So we will continue to grow and evolve. You saw one of our values is the growth mindset, and it's certainly something that we have to have. So I leave you with that. And speaking of evolutions, some data worth sharing about the evolution of advertising. I thought this stat was really fascinating. US linear advertising sales, which means TV ads, radio ads, print ads, outdoor ads, declined by an estimated 16% in 2020, while digital media grew 10%. This changed in part because consumer behavior changed so much in 2020. Fewer people were driving to see billboards or listen to commercial radio. And we know about the massive decline in print with local newspapers and magazines shuttering. There's been a lot of news about that, and it's something we've certainly highlighted. PwC's Media Outlook report, looking from 2020 and predicting into the future of 2024, print circulation is estimated to continue to fall 3% per year, while digital circulation revenue is predicted to grow at 9% compound annual growth rate. Not only was there a shift to digital, but how marketers are buying digital advertising has continued to evolve. We have seen a move to more programmatic purchasing via platforms like Facebook and Google away from direct buys. It's something that we recommend. We say buy behavior, not demographics. For example, if we look at 2 sites, BuzzFeed and Yelp, they saw massive declines in their display ads on site in 2020 versus 2019, because it makes less sense for advertisers to buy just one website rather than buy across websites programmatically, like via Google or on social media, where you can have the added bonus of storytelling. I think the New York Times, just sort of looking at the business of media, is a really fascinating case study. New York Times' revenue is now almost 70% from subscription fees and 30% from advertising. That's a massive change from just years ago. I remember, maybe it's just like 5 years ago, I shared the New York Times. They did a big report on how they had to evolve digitally. I shared it at boot camp 4 or 5 years ago. But sites that rely on advertising and direct placements like BuzzFeed and Yelp and Vox, they're having a really hard time, and they're being swallowed up by bigger companies for pennies on the dollar, because the advertising model just is not sustainable. And it's been interesting that outlets like the New York Times that are doing digital and evolving really quickly are buying up the talent, poaching top talent from these smaller websites. So like 2 of my favorites, Ezra Klein and Kara Swisher. I'm a giant nerd, but they moved to the New York Times, and they moved to the New York Times where they're not only writing editorial pieces, but they're also hosting podcasts. So I used to listen to Ezra Klein on Vox. Now I listen to Ezra Klein on the New York Times. Amazing content, by the way. Strong recommend. And Kara Swisher too on tech is she's so amazing, funny, and tough. Okay. In our data, to bring back an earlier slide, we saw a 47% decrease in the number of arts organizations purchasing direct placements during the pandemic, with only 42% reporting direct buys were part of their media spend between March and November of 2020. Also noticeable is the drop in programmatic display. And I've said this for a while, display advertising is really a carryover from the interruption age of advertising. As a consumer, you're reading or watching the news and you see an ad. We've seen strong ROIs from display, particularly for people who are already in an organization's universe, less so for acquisition, meaning new users. So for example, if I've been to a theater or a museum and later I see an ad for a new exhibit or production via a banner, it tends to resonate with me because I know the brand versus an organization I've never heard of, right? So like straight up interruption via banner ad, we've seen much lower ROIs for acquisition. But because unlike on social or video, a user can't share a display ad. Also, you can't storytell like you can on social and video. This is all to set up a conversation on another major shift happening because of the conditions set up by the pandemic and the events of this summer around social justice sparked by the brutal murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and countless others, too many to name. I want to pause for a moment and reflect and underscore my support and our support for Black Lives Matter and the trauma of the brutality, not only this summer, but throughout the history of the US and our systemic racism. And I will speak more about this shortly. But I think this activism we saw this summer brought an official end to the interruption age and moved us towards what I'm calling and others are calling the values age. For those that follow Capacity Interactive frequently, you've heard this from me before, but I think it's always worth repeating for new folks or as a reminder. I've talked for years about the move from interruption marketing to permission marketing. The interruption marketing paradigm embraced for most of the 20th century is that marketing is spending money to buy attention, and more is better. In an age of interruption marketing, advertisers had all the control. You wanted to watch TV, you had to watch commercials. You wanted to listen to radio, you had to listen to commercials. When TiVo was released in 1999, it changed the game and was an early symbol of a move to a time where we are now, where consumers had more and more control of their media consumption. In an age where consumers can delete or skip an ad or pay a monthly fee to be commercial free, like on Spotify or Netflix, the rules are changed and marketers need to move away from interruption and embrace permission marketing, a term coined by my hero and recent CI2I podcast guest, Seth Godin, in his 1999 book by the same name, Permission Marketing. Permission marketing is asking the question not how many people can I pay to interrupt, but asking the question, how many people actually want to hear from me? How many people are on my email list? How many people follow me on social media? Who would be upset if all of a sudden my emails and social content went away? These people have raised their hands to see your content and they are your permission base. And it is incredibly powerful and valuable. And this kind of marketing requires you to think about how you can give your audience more than what you ask of them. How can you delight your audience so they will tell their friends, tell their colleagues, and tell their family members about you? Permission marketing is about turning strangers into friends, friends into customers, and customers into evangelists. For those following closely, for the last year or two, I've been talking more and more, and my team has been talking more and more about the power of the last piece of this permission marketing model, evangelists. What people who love you say about you and how important that is. Turning the marketing funnel into a megaphone and handing it to your most ardent fans to talk about you. This is so important because in an age where everyone is so connected, the marketer has less control. The brand used to be what the marketer tells you it is, but now the brand is what we tell each other. That's a quote from Mark Schaefer, who's also been a guest on the CI2I podcast. The brand used to be what the marketer tells you it is. Now the brand is what we tell each other. In the ticket buyer study I mentioned earlier, we asked respondents to rank on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being most influential, how influential each of these sources are in making a decision to see a performance. What you see here is the percentage that ranked each source at a 4 or a 5. When deciding whether or not to see a performance that interests you, how influential are the following? Number 1, friends and family member. More than arts organization content, but I'm happy that content is up there next. Critical review, a 30%, 6% from celebrity public figure or influencer. When we slice and dice that by age, you see the importance of friend or family member becomes more. Content becomes more important. Critical reviews become less important. This idea of the authority figure, this trust in institutions declining in America, particularly for younger people. People don't believe institutions, they believe each other. Now, we're working on, if this data is useful, and I hope it is, we're working on building an approach to our ticket buyer study to help us gather data about how arts patrons are consuming media as we start reopening our venues. If you're interested in being part of this research and haven't been in the past, please email Madeline at mpolilis@capacityinteractive.com or reach out to us through our website. Now back to our program. But evangelism, like we saw there, of the arts is alive and well, even during the pandemic and well into the age of virtual performances. Here you see examples from my personal social media, people sharing arts experiences. I encourage you to think about, what is the last book you read? What was the last TV show you binged? What is the last streaming arts experience that you checked out? You probably heard about it from a friend or family member, not because you saw a print ad or a radio ad. Possibly it's from an email from an arts organization or social content from an arts organization. I would guess it's either from someone else or from the arts organization because you're in their permission base. In the interruption age, you may have gone to the organization with the biggest ad, and now you see what your friend posted or shared about a great experience. So I've demonstrated how TiVo was the beginning of the decline of the interruption age in 1999, and I believe that 2020 is the end of it. So TiVo marked the beginning of the decline of interruption, and 2020 ended it. And we're now shifting to what I and others, as I said, are calling the values age. And what do I mean by this? George Floyd's murder and the activism this summer put an end to the interruption age because organizations were forced to react and react quickly. The days of executives sitting around taking weeks or months to come up with clever ads to interrupt people is ending, if not over. This is based on the idea that the brand is in control. Social media and the need for immediate responses made it much harder for companies to pretend. Looking at some external research from a really cool Salesforce study called The State of the Connected Consumer, 68% of customers expect brands to demonstrate empathy, right? Brands demonstrating empathy. 37% of consumers say brands actually demonstrate empathy. So there's a real gap here. And I think the winners are the organizations that can move to the left, that can demonstrate empathy. Consumers want brands to follow this evolution. 4 more stats from that study. 71% say I pay more attention to companies' values than I did a year ago. 61% said I stopped buying from companies whose values don't align with mine. 59% I have switched to a company whose values align with mine. I really need to take another drink of water. But this last one, 51% of consumers say they have the power to influence change in companies. That's huge. More than half of people feel like they have the power, with the power of their wallet and the power of social media, to influence change in companies. A really great example in our sphere is the Public Theater in New York City. And they're a great example of an organization that exemplifies the values age. This summer, they quickly opened their lobby that was closed for BLM protesters to use the restroom and get water. This may not seem so monumental now, but I want you to go back to June. We were all still deeply in quarantine. Everything was closed, and the Public Theater brought volunteers and staff, and they hired security and opened their lobby quickly to support the activism that was happening. Later in the fall, the Public Theater converted the facade of their historic home into a blank canvas for an art installation called Say Their Names that honors, remembers, and includes over 2,000 names and accompanying sentences of Black lives murdered at the hands of the police. Another example is the New Repertory Theater outside of Boston. This was brought to us by Mary Claire Holbert at our October boot camp. She shared this example, but the theater sent out a statement on email and social about their support of Black Lives Matter, and they got responses from audience members and donors who said they were not happy about it. And they said they won't support you. I'm considering whether I'll come back if you continue to make these sort of statements. And their artistic director at the time, Michael Bobbitt, publicly stated, "You are not welcome to return." And he posted on Facebook. A few patrons have responded negatively to New Rep Theater's Black Lives Matter email and posting. I've invited them to not return. I have told them they are not welcome. New Rep does not want their money. And this post got a ton of support. People were saying, I will become a new patron. I will donate. I have already donated in response to this. You have a new patron in me. This is about taking a stand. Teresa Ruth Howard, who was in that same session at boot camp with Mary Claire, she said it's spring cleaning. You get rid of the people who don't align with you, but you'll in turn attract people because you're putting out a different vibration. And when she said vibrations, it made me think of one of my heroes, RuPaul, who talks about finding your frequency so that other people in your energy strain will gravitate towards you like a beacon. I believe organizations need to know what wavelength they're on, and they will attract, you will attract the people that believe in that, and you can let the others go. And to do this requires understanding the power of the minimum viable audience that I learned about from Seth Godin, who says, when you seek to engage with everyone, you rarely delight anyone. The solution is simple but counterintuitive. Stake out the smallest market you can imagine, the smallest market that can sustain your organization, the smallest market you can adequately serve. This goes against everything you learn in capitalism school, but in fact, it's the simplest way to matter. You have to know what you stand for. You have to think smaller. Stephen Roth, who's a pricing consultant, said on the CI to I podcast once, you have to learn to shop in your own closet, right? We love the work we're doing. We want everyone to come, but everyone doesn't care. And most people don't care. And that's okay. You have to put blinders on to the ones that don't care and find the ones that do. And we'll talk about it. That influences your program. That influences your programming, your education efforts, your marketing efforts. Focusing on your evangelists and let them tell the story for you. As Seth Godin says, two things happen when you delight your minimum viable audience. You'll discover it's a lot larger group than you expected, and they will tell others. On the other hand, if you aim for mass, which is really just another word for average, you'll probably create something average, which doesn't get you very far. Now, we see marketing of values in more and more companies, not only within the arts, but within corporate America. Two leading examples of companies who are not as scared to express their values and know their minimum viable audience are Nike and Ben & Jerry's. With the often discussed Colin Kaepernick campaign, Nike knows what they stand for and know their minimum viable audience. And they know that not everyone is going to feel the same way, but they don't care. They do it. They know their minimum viable audience, and they're willing to put blinders on to the people who don't vibe with them. Ben & Jerry's is another great example. In the wake of the murder of George Floyd, Ben & Jerry's put out a statement that garnered attention for its starkness, really amid a sea of corporate platitudes. And we're seeing more and more brands and organizations make the changes to embrace the values age. This requires knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what you don't. It requires embracing a minimum viable audience and not being afraid to address political and social issues that affect your community and staff publicly and sometimes quickly. This requires adapting to this new values-driven mindset and investing your resources in supporting it. Now, every organization here today is in a different spot here. Some of you are doing this work and doing it brilliantly. Others are new to this, and it may feel impossible. Others are somewhere in the middle. I see all of you. This is hard work, but this is important work. And I think this is the work of our time. And the arts is a community gathering place. And the arts is the driver of culture, and we need to lead the way. According to Scott Galloway in his book Post-Corona that I mentioned at the top of today, this is a good time to make hard changes to position your organization for the post-Corona world. Start with a clean sheet of paper. Freed from legacy decisions, how would you change things? In some ways, the pandemic gives you cloud cover to make bigger decisions with fewer guardrails. For those of you who think this seems impossible, I fear the longer you wait to make these changes, the harder it will get. And I know many of you here today are not in positions to lead this change, but you can certainly impact it. you can certainly impact change, and I will address this briefly in my conclusion. If you're still questioning this, I want to turn to Afdel Aziz, who is a purpose consultant. He runs a social impact consulting firm. And he said, diversity is the only viable growth strategy. You must have people inside your organization who think and act like the outside world, and looking at population trends and understanding the global majority. If you want to grow, you need to embrace diversity and anti-racism, and work on your inclusion and all of these things around social change. This is a big discussion. I could talk about it all day, but I want to move on to a big idea and get to our conclusion here, because we're at the hour mark. For those of you that, and not to be trite about that, because it is such a big topic, but for those of you that follow CI closely, you may know I got obsessed with the model of the flywheel when I saw it at HubSpot's Inbound Conference in late 2018. I wrote a blog post called The Flywheel, a New Model for Arts Marketing. It's on our blog. It's really informed our work and our consulting ever since. The model looks at 4 areas. The flywheel is a growth model. A flywheel is like a spin bike. It says growth is the faster you can spin that wheel. And there's 4 areas. Attracting is about creating content and conversations to start meaningful relationships. Engaging is about building lasting relationships. How you get people who are interested to come and spend their money and time with you. Delighting is about providing an outstanding experience and encourages people to become promoters or evangelists of your organization. It is squared because it's so important, and also because people are so connected via social media. For example, conversations that used to be one-on-one at the barbershop or the water cooler are now one-to-many because of social media and digital. And friction at the bottom is anything that slows the flywheel. A poor mobile site, draconian policies, uncomfortable seats, a rude usher. So I was real into this, and I still am. I think it's a fascinating model, and it's super important. And it allows you to prioritize, I think, on delight and friction. But reflecting on really the last year and looking forward, and inspired by this model, I want to propose a new model that's been on my mind and encourages you to focus on the key areas we've talked about that I believe can drive growth in 2021 and beyond. The new model is permission-based plus values plus evangelism squared divided by friction. Permission-based, I talked about earlier. How many people have you earned the right to talk to? You grow this by creating great content that people want, to get people to raise their hands, by sending emails that give in addition to ask. Email is content. Let's not forget it. We often forget that email is content, like social. We grow our permission base by offering amazing programming. And now I'm out of water. By thinking about the opportunities of when you can collect a lead. We've had great success running lead generation campaigns on social media during the last year, so organizations have an engaged and growing base as they sell more digital content and move to reopening. Values underlie everything you do. Your values aren't your mission, they're how you treat people, they're how you treat issues, your ability to connect to your minimum viable audience. It's your ability to take public stands on important social issues that impact your community, becoming a values-driven organization. Evangelism is how much people are talking about you. Again, it's squared because of the connection. One of my favorite stats is from Colleen Dillenschneider, who with data proved what people say about you is 12.85 times more important than what you say about yourself. And friction essentially slows everything down. What am I doing that people hate? Stop doing that. So this model is brand new. I'm excited for your questions and comments about it. And I think it can evolve and grow. And so we're moving on here. It's a lot to cover. Time is going fast. I don't think this next stat will surprise many of you, but we learned that digital marketing will play a major role in arts organizations reopening, which is the final stat of our research. 93% of respondents agree or strongly agree that digital marketing will play a critical role in reopening. Now, actually, that's not the final stat. This is the final stat. Something on almost every arts marketer's mind is the balance between paid and free digital programming. I've asked that question quite a bit. What do we charge? How much do we charge? When do we charge? What about free? Do we ask for a lead? So we asked, is your virtual programming ticketed or requires registration? You can see here, this is particularly around virtual artistic programming. 63% said all or some is unpaid registration. 65% say all or some requires paid ticketing, and 78% say all or some is free and ungated. If you're not asking for an email address, your organization may be missing out on valuable leads from people that are raising their hand to participate, which isn't to say that you shouldn't do free programming, because there's lots of reasons, but it is an incredible opportunity to think about using free programming to build your permission database. And if you're not asking for an email, consider building action-based remarketing pools based on video views, like you can do on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, so you can reach those viewers in the future. Now with all the changes of iOS 14 that I mentioned earlier. So I'd like to share an example of, when I get asked this question, should we do it for free? Why should we not just charge for everything? Our board is pressuring us to charge for everything. I just want to think about how we've thought about it at Capacity Interactive. Back in April, we were all shocked. I was thinking, how can we ease the pain in this time of loss for our arts world? What can we do for the arts sector that's about helping and showing sincere compassion and providing something truly useful? So we offered a half-day boot camp. Boot camp is an annual conference we've offered for 9 years, but it was always paid in October in New York City. So with my incredible team, in a matter of weeks, we put together a free event that included speakers inside and outside of the arts and music performances. I'm sure many of you attended. We had over 5,000 people register for that with an email address. About a third of them were new to our database. And since then, it has 15,000 YouTube views. And the event was totally free, but it required an email address. And then over the summer after that, we continue to offer free live streams that required an email address. We published free content that required an email address, our content inspiration gallery, our content calendars. And then later in the summer, when it came time to announce our paid bootcamp, we had a much larger engaged list of people who attended our free event and saw what we were doing and knew our content. They saw the spirit of what we offer and were far more likely to register. Our last in-person boot camp had about 500 in-person attendees. Our 2020 online version sort of blew my mind. We had 2,500 paid attendees. There's lower barriers to digital, but the numbers just sort of blew my mind. And I think this was in a huge part due to the free events that we offered in the spring. So this is how I would answer your question and frame the balance between free and paid programming. I think your free programming or your programming free that requires some sort of permission bolsters your paid programming. And to watch it live, I think about asking for a lead. And it can be free without a lead, not live, but that will all bolster free paid programming. So another question I get asked quite a bit is, do we stop our digital programming once we're back in person? To which I'd like to reference something I learned from Robin Cantrell-Fenwick in the Cultural Restart Audience Tracker from Baker Richards Indigo and One Further. This was on the last See Eye to Eye podcast we released. Robin said from his research of over 10,000 frequent arts attendees, 67% of people said that they would accept digital as a second best option when they cannot access the live performance. So that's pretty remarkable. So there's something you want to see, you can't see it live. Even when you're back, you think about going digital. And I realize the challenges of this with limited resource, just as another data point to have in your back pocket. The model that I keep going back to was shared with me by Lourdes Lopez early in the pandemic, the artistic director of Miami City Ballet, who said arts organizations need to be thinking more like sports teams that have in-person games, matches, whatever you call them, and then televised or streaming programming as well. So in-person experience and digital experience. So that was a lot. All right, and I had to edit that back. So there's obviously a lot to disclose or to discuss. We disclosed it. Now we need to discuss it. So I was inspired by Clive Gillinson, the CEO of Carnegie Hall. He said, the older I get, the less I'm interested in answers and the more I'm interested in questions. So I wanted to leave you with 4 questions. One, how are you centering culture and values and creating a workplace where there is safe space for conflict based on trust? Let me try that again. How are you centering culture and values and creating a workplace where there is space for safe conflict based on trust? Remember, your mission is not your values. Leaders, this is so important because you have the power. Mid-level and junior level folks, you have more power than you think. Find like-minded people. Share this presentation and the resources I've shared with your leaders. Gather and talk, and this is how change has been made for generations. The second question, how do you plan to build on the digital efforts you put forward during the pandemic? What strategies and tactics that no longer serve you are you leaving behind? 3, how can you frame your growth around your permission base, your values, evangelism, and reducing friction? And 4, how are you using digital marketing and programming now to prepare for reopening? So what's next? There's no time to answer questions today, sadly, but we are going to create a podcast episode with your questions. So look out for a podcast in your email. And thank you for those that submitted questions. If you work for an arts services organization, a foundation, or a conference or other place where arts administrators gather and are interested in bringing this conversation directly to your constituents, please email Madeline Paulus or on the Capacity Interactive website. I'd like to do some quick thank yous. I'd like to thank Wolf Brown for their support in administering and analyzing this data, and our study partners who took the survey, and my incredible colleagues who helped make today possible. My amazing right hand, Madeline Paulus, who is doing all the amazing behind the scenes work. Jonna Fellows-Gluth, who advised us on a lot of this research, all of this research. Our marketing and content team, aka our Make It Pop team, Chrissy Packer, Stephanie Medina, and Megan McFarland, and all the other folks at CI who contributed to this research and session. If you liked today, please like this video below and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And really appreciate your time today. And I wish you all the best as you navigate all of these really challenging times. Let's see. I don't think, it's 2 minutes. I'm not going to try to rush a question in here, but I really appreciate you asking them. Please send your feedback to this. And thank you again for everyone for joining us today. Cheers.